The vase slipped from my hand and shattered against the hardwood floor. I froze, staring at the broken pieces scattered around my feet. It was just a cheap glass thing that sat on the hallway shelf, nothing special, nothing valuable. But the sound it made when it hit the ground might as well have been a bomb going off. "What did you do?" My daughter-in-law Amanda's voice cut through the silence like a knife. She rushed over, her face twisted with rage. "That was an heirloom. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I opened my mouth to apologize, but she wasn't finished. "You're so careless, Maria. What do you even do all day besides make messes?" Her words stung worse than any physical blow. I had been scrubbing their kitchen floor on my hands and knees just minutes before, trying to get a stain out that their toddler had made with his juice box. My son Saul appeared in the doorway, his face dark with anger. He didn't even look at the broken vase. He just looked at me with disgust, like I was something dirty he'd found stuck to his shoe. "You're useless," he said coldly. "Just get out and don't come back." I stood there in the hallway, holding the cleaning rag in my trembling hands. My knees were still sore from scrubbing their floors. My back ached from bending over their sink, washing their dishes. I had spent the entire morning cooking breakfast for them, packing Saul's lunch, and getting little Tommy ready for daycare while they both slept in. For 8 months, I had lived in their guest room. 8 months of being treated like hired help instead of family. It started small. Could I watch Tommy while they went out? Could I do a load of laundry since I wasn't working? Could I cook dinner since I was home anyway? Slowly, I stopped being mom and became the maid. I woke up before dawn to prepare their coffee. I stayed up late cleaning up after their dinner parties. I never complained. I never asked for anything in return. I thought I was helping my son build his life. But standing there with Saul glaring at me and Amanda shaking her head in disgust, I realized the truth. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as free labor. And now that I had made one small mistake, they were throwing me away like garbage. I packed my bags in silence while they watched TV in the living room. Saul didn't come upstairs to check on me. Amanda didn't offer to help or say she was sorry for overreacting. They just acted like I was already gone. My hands shook as I folded my clothes and put them in my old suitcase. 8 months of my life reduced to 2 bags and a broken heart. I had moved in after my house was destroyed in a flood, and Saul had seemed so eager to help back then. "Come live with us, Mom," he had said. "It'll be good to have you close, especially with the baby." What a lie that turned out to be. I picked up the framed photo of Tommy from my nightstand, the one where he was laughing in my arms. I almost packed it, then set it back down. If Saul wanted me gone, then I would be gone completely. I carried my bags downstairs and walked past them without saying a word. Saul glanced up from his phone just long enough to watch me head for the door. "Finally," Amanda muttered under her breath. I closed the door behind me and walked to my car, my vision blurry with tears. I drove through the rain with no destination in mind. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I replayed every moment of the last 8 months. All those nights I had gotten up with Tommy when he was crying, rocking him back to sleep while his parents stayed in bed. All those meals I had cooked, only to eat alone while they went out with friends. The memory that hurt the most was my birthday 3 months ago. I had hoped for a small celebration, maybe a cake or even just a happy birthday. Instead, Amanda had asked me to babysit so they could go to dinner. When I gently mentioned it was my birthday, Saul had shrugged and said, "We can celebrate when we get back." They came home at midnight, drunk and loud, and never mentioned my birthday again. I pulled over at a red light and wiped my eyes. Where was I supposed to go? I had been staying with them because my insurance company was still processing my flood claim. At least, that's what I had told them. The truth was much more complicated. The light turned green and I made a decision. I turned toward the coast, toward a place Saul and Amanda had never seen, a place they didn't even know existed. My name is Maria Parks, and for most of my life, I lived believing that family meant everything. My late husband Carlos and I had raised Saul in a modest 2-bedroom house, clipping coupons and shopping at thrift stores. We never took vacations or bought expensive things. We believed in living within our means and saving for the future. Carlos was always careful with money, almost to a fault. He would spend hours researching every purchase, comparing prices, and looking for deals. "It's not about what you make," he used to say. "It's about what you keep." Some people thought we were cheap, but we knew we were building something for our family. The only time Carlos ever splurged was on stocks. He had bought shares in a small technology company back in 1998, some startup that nobody had heard of. I thought it was crazy to spend $3,000 on something so risky, but Carlos was convinced. "This is going to change everything, Maria," he had said. For years, nothing happened. The stock went up a little, down a little, mostly stayed the same. Carlos refused to sell it, even when we needed money for Sol's college fund. "Not yet," he would always say. "Not yet." Carlos passed away 5 years ago, and I was heartbroken. We had been married for 32 years, and suddenly I was alone in our little house with nothing but memories and a shoebox full of financial papers I didn't understand. Sol helped me sort through everything, and we found Carlos's old stock certificates tucked away in his desk drawer. "What's this company, Mom?" Sol had asked, squinting at the faded paperwork. I explained about Carlos's long-shot investment, and Sol laughed. "Dad and his crazy schemes. This is probably worthless now." But something made me look it up online. The company Carlos had invested in had grown into one of the biggest technology firms in the world. Those $3,000 worth of stock were now worth $14 million. I stared at the computer screen, reading the numbers over and over again. I didn't tell Sol right away. Something held me back. Maybe it was the way he had laughed at his father's crazy scheme, or maybe I was just too shocked to speak. Instead, I quietly cashed out the stocks and invested the money in real estate. Beach houses, rental properties, commercial buildings. Within 3 years, I had doubled Carlos's miracle windfall. I was worth over $30 million, and nobody knew. I kept living in our modest house and shopping at the same stores. I didn't want the money to change me or spoil Sol. I had seen what sudden wealth could do to families, and I wanted him to stay grounded. My plan was simple. Live quietly, invest wisely, and leave everything to Sol and his future children when my time came. When the flood destroyed my house last year, I saw it as a sign. Sol immediately offered to let me stay with them, and I was touched by his kindness. I thought it would be wonderful to be close to my grandson and help with the baby, while Sol and Amanda got established in their careers. The insurance money from the flood would have easily paid for a new house, but I told Sol I was waiting for the claim to process. It was easier than explaining why I didn't need insurance money to rebuild. I moved into their guest room with my 2 suitcases and my secret, thinking I was helping my family. I never imagined they would treat me like a servant. I never thought my own son would speak to me the way he did tonight. But here I was, driving through the rain to a place I had hoped I would never need. I pulled into the long driveway and pressed my thumb to the gate scanner. The iron gate swung open silently, and I drove up the winding road toward the house. Even in the dark, it was breathtaking. Glass walls overlooked the ocean, and soft lights illuminated the modern architecture. This was my secret, a $13 million beach house in Malibu that I had bought 2 years ago as an investment. I parked in the circular driveway and sat in my car for a moment, looking up at the house. I had only been here a few times, usually just to check on the property or meet with the management company. It felt surreal to think this was mine, when just an hour ago I had been scrubbing floors for my son. I grabbed my bags and walked to the front door. The house manager, Diane, had left the key in the lockbox, as I had requested during my panicked phone call from the road. I opened the door and stepped inside, my footsteps echoing in the marble foyer. The silence was overwhelming after months of Sol's TV blaring and Amanda's constant complaining. I walked through the house, turning on lights, feeling like a stranger in my own property. I made myself a cup of tea and sat on the terrace, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. The rain had stopped, and moonlight reflected off the waves. For the first time in months, I could think clearly. The hurt was still there, the pain of being rejected by my own son, but underneath it was something else. Relief. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. It was late, but I knew she would answer. My niece Chloe had always been a night owl, Aunt Maria, are you okay? It's almost midnight. Chloe, I need to see my lawyer tomorrow. Can you help me set up a meeting? There was a pause. Chloe was sharp, and she could hear something in my voice. What happened? Are you at Souls? No, I'm not at Souls. I'm done being at Souls. Another pause. Where are you? I looked out at the ocean and smiled for the first time all day. I'm home. I'll call Peterson first thing in the morning, Chloe said. Are you sure you're okay? I'm better than okay, I said. I'm finally awake. The next morning, I called my lawyer from the beach house's home office. James Peterson had handled Carlos's will and all my real estate investments. He was one of the few people who knew about my wealth. Maria, what can I do for you? I need to change my will, James. Completely. All right. What changes did you have in mind? I took a deep breath. I want to set up a trust fund for my grandson Tommy, accessible when he turns 25. 70% of my estate should go into that trust. The remaining 30% goes to women's shelters and organizations that help displaced families. And your son, Saul? Nothing. Saul gets nothing. James was quiet for a moment. Maria, that's a significant change. Are you sure you want to do this? Maybe you should think about it for a few days. I've been thinking about it all night, I said. Saul made his choice when he threw me out like garbage. Now I'm making mine. I'll draft the new will today. Can you come in this afternoon to sign? I'll be there at 2. I hung up and felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For years, I had planned to leave everything to Saul. But last night had opened my eyes. I was protecting Tommy's future, but Saul would have to face the consequences of his actions. That afternoon, I signed the new will in James's office. 70% of over $30 million would go to Tommy when he came of age. The rest would help other women who had been discarded by their families. Saul and Amanda would inherit nothing but the memory of how they had treated me. This is final, Maria, James warned as I signed the last page. Once this is executed, it would be very difficult to change back. I understand, I said, my signature firm and clear. Saul wanted me out of his life. Now I'm out of his will too. I drove back to the beach house feeling lighter than I had in months. I had spent 8 months walking on eggshells, trying to please people who saw me as nothing more than free labor. Those days were over. I called the cleaning service and had them deep clean the house. I called the grocery delivery service and stocked the kitchen with food I actually wanted to eat. I even called a local nursery and had them deliver plants for the terrace. For the first time in years, I was going to live for myself. That evening, as I watched the sunset from my deck, my phone started ringing. Saul's name appeared on the screen. I watched it ring until it went to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. I didn't answer Saul's calls. I didn't listen to his voicemails. I spent the next few days settling into my beach house and rediscovering what it felt like to make my own choices. I woke up when I wanted to. I ate what I wanted to eat. I wore what I wanted to wear instead of old clothes that wouldn't show stains from cleaning. On the 4th day, Saul showed up at the house. I watched from my upstairs window as he walked up to the front door, his face confused as he took in the expensive architecture and ocean views. He rang the doorbell several times, then started pounding on the door. Mom, I know you're in there. Open up. I opened the intercom system. What do you want, Saul? What is this place? How can you afford this? That's not your concern anymore. Mom, please. Amanda feels terrible about what happened. We both do. Come home and we'll talk about it. Home. He called his house my home, but he had thrown me out of it like trash. This is my home now, Saul. That's ridiculous. You can't afford a place like this. Whose house is it really? I pressed the button to end the conversation and walked away from the intercom. Saul didn't give up easily. He came back the next day with Amanda and Tommy. I watched from my window as Amanda's jaw dropped when she saw the house. She walked around the property, taking pictures with her phone, her eyes wide with disbelief. They rang the doorbell for 20 minutes before Saul started shouting, Mom, we need to talk. This is crazy. You can't just disappear. I called the security company I had hired and had them removed from the property. I wasn't ready to deal with Saul's anger or Amanda's suddenly sweet voice asking me to come home. They had made their feelings clear when they threw me out. Now I was making my feelings clear. That evening, Chloe called me. Sol's been calling everyone in the family, asking if they know where you are. He says you're living in some millionaire's house and he's worried about you. I am living in a millionaire's house, I said. Mine. Chloe was quiet for a moment. Aunt Maria, what aren't you telling me? So I told her everything, about Carlos's stock investment, about the real estate, about the money I had kept secret for so many years. Chloe listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was silent for a long time. Holy shit, Aunt Maria, you're rich. I'm comfortable, I corrected. No, you're rich. And Sol has no idea? None. Word started getting out. Somehow, people in Sol's neighborhood began talking about the mysterious older woman living in the mansion by the beach. Someone had seen me at the grocery store and recognized me as Sol's mother. Social media posts started appearing with photos of my house and speculation about who I really was. Sol called me in a panic. Mom, people are saying you're living in some celebrity's house. They think you're house-sitting or something. You need to come home before people start asking questions. What questions would those be, Sol? Like how you can afford to live there. It looks crazy, Mom. People are going to think you lost your mind or got involved with some rich old man. The irony was perfect. Sol was more worried about what the neighbors thought than about how he had treated me. Let them think whatever they want, I said. This is embarrassing for our whole family. I'm not embarrassed, I said. Are you? Mom, please, just come home and we'll forget this whole thing happened. I am home, Sol, and no, we won't forget what happened, ever. I hung up and blocked his number. Chloe came to visit me the following weekend. She walked through the house with her mouth open, touching the marble countertops and staring out at the ocean views. This is insane, Aunt Maria. You've been living like a monk when you could have been living like a queen. I wasn't ready for all this before, I said. I thought keeping it simple was better for Sol. And how did that work out? I laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Not well. Chloe sat beside me on the terrace. So what's the plan now? Are you going to tell Sol the truth? Eventually, he'll figure it out. Property records are public, but I'm not going to make it easy for him. What about Tommy? That was the question that kept me awake at night. I missed my grandson terribly. He was the innocent victim in all of this. I've set up a trust fund for him. When he's old enough to understand what happened, he'll have choices his father never gave me. Chloe nodded. And until then? Until then, I'm going to live my life. We spent the weekend planning my new future. I had spent so many years taking care of other people that I had forgotten what it felt like to take care of myself. Sol's desperation grew as days turned into weeks. He started showing up at the house at different times, hoping to catch me off guard. Sometimes he brought Amanda and Tommy, using my grandson as emotional leverage. I watched from my windows as Tommy played on my beach while Sol paced around, talking on his phone. I could have called security every time, but seeing Tommy made my heart ache. He was walking now, chasing seagulls and laughing at the waves. He didn't understand why Grandma wouldn't come outside to play with him. One morning, Sol brought a locksmith to the gate, claiming he was worried about my safety and needed to do a wellness check. The locksmith took one look at the high-end security system and the no trespassing signs and left without doing anything. That's when Sol got creative. He started telling people I was having a mental breakdown. He posted on social media about his missing mother, who was confused and possibly being taken advantage of by strangers. He created a whole narrative about a vulnerable elderly woman who needed to be rescued from predators. The post went viral in our local community. I started getting calls from old friends, neighbors, even my dentist, all expressing concern about my welfare. I decided it was time to set the record straight. I called Chloe, who had just finished law school and was working at a prestigious firm in the city. I need you to schedule a press conference, I said. A press conference? Aunt Maria, are you sure? Sol wants to play games with my reputation. Time to show him what real power looks like. Chloe arranged everything. We met with reporters at James Peterson's law office, where I had official documents ready to prove everything. Financial statements, property deeds, investment portfolios, all laid out in black and white. My name is Maria Parks, I began, sitting calmly behind a table full of lawyers and paperwork. My son Saul has been telling people that I'm confused, missing, or being manipulated. I'm here to set the record straight. I explained about Carlos's investment, about my real estate portfolio, about my decision to live quietly until my family showed me who they really were. I showed receipts for everything, literally. Property purchases, tax returns, bank statements. The reporters scribbled notes frantically. I am not missing. I am not confused. I am not being manipulated. I am a businesswoman who chose to leave a toxic situation. The story exploded online within hours. Local millionaire reveals truth about son's claims became the headline that everyone was sharing. The press conference footage went viral, and suddenly Saul's social media posts looked very different in context. Comments poured in from people who had seen Saul's missing mother posts. Wait, she's rich and he kicked her out? This woman is a millionaire and was cleaning his house? Plot twist of the century. Saul called me from at least 6 different phones, trying to get through my blocks. When that didn't work, he showed up at the house with Amanda, both of them looking desperate and angry. Mom, you just humiliated us in front of the entire city. I spoke to them through the intercom. I corrected lies you were spreading about me. Everyone thinks we're horrible people now. Aren't you? Amanda grabbed the intercom. Maria, please. We can work this out. We made mistakes, but we're family. Family doesn't treat each other the way you treated me. We'll do better. We promise. I don't believe your promises anymore, Amanda. Saul pushed her aside. Fine, keep your stupid house, but don't expect us to come crawling back when you get lonely. I won't, I said, and turned off the intercom. After the press conference, I started receiving letters from women all over the country. Stories from mothers, grandmothers, and wives who had been taken advantage of by their own families. Women who had been treated like servants, discarded when they were no longer useful, or manipulated into giving up their independence. One letter particularly moved me. It was from a woman named Helen, whose daughter had convinced her to sell her house and move in to help with the grandkids. Like me, Helen had found herself doing all the housework, childcare, and cooking while her daughter and son-in-law went out and enjoyed their lives. When Helen broke her hip and couldn't work anymore, they put her in a nursing home and kept the money from her house sale. I called Helen that night. We talked for 2 hours about our experiences, about the guilt and heartbreak of being betrayed by our own children. She cried when I told her about the women's shelter donations in my new will. You're doing something good with your pain, she said. I wish I was brave enough to do the same. It's not about being brave, I told her. It's about refusing to be a victim anymore. That conversation planted a seed in my mind. I decided to move away from the city entirely. The beach house was beautiful, but it was too close to Saul and too much of a reminder of the drama. I wanted a fresh start somewhere peaceful, where I could build a new life without looking over my shoulder. I found a charming house in a small coastal town, 3 hours north. It wasn't a mansion, just a comfortable 3-bedroom home with a garden and a view of the harbor. I could walk to the library, the coffee shop, and the farmer's market. It felt like the kind of place where I could be myself without explanation. Before I left, I had one last visitor. Saul showed up alone this time, without Amanda or Tommy. He looked tired and defeated, nothing like the angry young man who had thrown me out of his house. Mom, I'm sorry, he said through the intercom. I really am. We treated you badly, and I know that now. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered the look of disgust on his face when he called me useless. I remembered months of being invisible in his house, except when he needed something from me. I appreciate the apology, Saul, but it doesn't change anything. What do you want from me? I said I was sorry. And there it was. He still didn't understand. He thought an apology was something he could give me to get what he wanted, not because he actually felt remorse. I don't want anything from you anymore, Saul. That's the point. I moved to Harbor Falls on a sunny Tuesday morning. The moving truck looked ridiculous, pulling up to my modest new house. Most of my belongings were still in storage from the flood, and I had lived so simply at Saul's that I barely had anything to move. My new neighbors, Jack and Sandra Mills, came over with fresh cookies and genuine smiles. They didn't know about my money or my family drama. To them, I was just Maria, the new woman who had bought the blue house on Maple Street. "We're so glad someone finally bought this place," Sandra said. "It's been empty for months. Are you retired?" "Recently, yes," I said, which was true enough. I had been retired from being Sol's unpaid housekeeper for several weeks now. I spent my first week in Harbor Falls setting up my new life. I bought furniture at local stores, choosing pieces because I liked them, not because they were practical or would hide stains. I planted flowers in my garden. I joined the library's book club and signed up to volunteer at the literacy center. For the first time in years, I was living for myself. 3 months into my new life, I got a call from Chloe. "Aunt Maria, you need to know what's happening with Sol." My stomach clenched. What now? He lost his job 2 weeks ago. Budget cuts. And Amanda, she filed for divorce last week. I sat down heavily in my kitchen chair. I had expected Sol to face some social consequences for how he treated me, but I hadn't expected his whole life to fall apart. "There's more," Chloe continued. "They're fighting over custody of Tommy, and neither of them has money for lawyers. Amanda moved back in with her parents, and Sol had to sell the house." I felt sick. Tommy was caught in the middle of a mess that started with his parents' greed and cruelty. "Where is Sol living now?" "Some studio apartment across town. He's been calling family members asking for money." "Has he called you?" 3 times. I didn't answer. I closed my eyes and tried to process this information. I had wanted Sol to understand the consequences of his actions, but I hadn't wanted his son to suffer. "Chloe, I want you to set up a small fund for Tommy's immediate needs. Food, clothes, medical care. But I want it managed through the family court, not through Sol or Amanda." "Are you sure?" "Tommy didn't do anything wrong. He shouldn't pay for his parents' mistakes." Sol found out about my new address somehow, probably through legal documents related to Tommy's care fund. He showed up at my house on a rainy Thursday evening, looking thinner and older than when I had last seen him. I opened the door and looked at my son. He had been crying, and his clothes looked like he had been sleeping in them. For a moment, all I saw was the little boy who used to climb into my lap when he was scared. "Mom, please, I have nowhere else to go." "Sol, you can't be here. I lost everything. My job, my house, my wife. Tommy won't even talk to me because Amanda told him I'm the reason Grandma went away." My heart broke for Tommy, but I stood firm. "I'm sorry you're struggling, but that's not my responsibility anymore. I'm your son. And I was your mother. That didn't stop you from throwing me out like garbage." Sol broke down completely then, sobbing on my front porch like a child. "I know I messed up. I know I was terrible to you. But I learned my lesson, okay? I lost everything because of how I treated you. Isn't that enough punishment?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Sol, punishment isn't the point. The point is that you're still only thinking about yourself. You're not sorry for hurting me. You're sorry that hurting me had consequences for you." I closed the door and watched through my window as Sol sat on my porch for another hour before finally leaving. My phone started ringing immediately. Sol calling from his car, leaving desperate voicemails. "Mom, I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll get counseling. I'll work on myself. Just please don't abandon me." But he still didn't understand. I hadn't abandoned him. He had abandoned me first, and now he was facing the reality of that choice.